The Third Side of the Coin, brought to you by XCaliber Coaching and Consulting.
Hi Tim, how you doing today?
Hi, Alex. Doing great. How are you?
Fantastic. Thank you so much for asking. Well, hello and welcome to the Third Side of the Coin podcast. This is our new business series called Next Steps for Success. And in this part two, business transformation, we will discuss what international agencies or corporations, as well as serial entrepreneurs, are thinking about transformation and different approaches to running their businesses during the times of current pandemic situation. And before we start, if you like the topic, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. We also ask that you share this video with your friends and colleagues if you find it helpful. So to just kind of get us kicked off, let me talk quickly about what I found recently, which is quite interesting. I wanted to mention the survey that was conducted in October by McKinsey, where they explored, and I'm quoting, how COVID-19 has pushed companies over the tipping point and transformed business forever. They found that the responses to the pandemic have speeded up the adoption of digital technology by several years. I believe they mentioned by up to 7 years, and that many of those changes could be here for a long haul. And so to stay competitive in this new business and economic environment requires new strategies and practices. And they're saying, again, this is all me quoting from those findings, they suggest that executives are taking note. Most respondents recognize technology's strategic importance as a critical component of the business, not just as a source of cost efficiencies. Respondents from the companies that have executed successful responses to the crisis report a range of technology capabilities that others don't. Not only the digital technologies are ramping up, but so are the fears of current workforce. HBR in September article noted, and I quote, fears of robot-induced unemployment are on the rise as tasks traditionally performed by humans are increasingly performed using robots and artificial intelligence. And the declining cost of machines threatens low-skill jobs and routine tasks. And just my comment, I don't think that's necessarily a new aspect, but it seems that those fears are intensifying. So what is your take on the changes that the companies are going to have to address to transform successfully?
Well, I think digitization, as the reports were saying, and what I'm seeing out there is just happening in much faster than anyone expected. And actually, we've seen in the past 8 months, the biggest migration to digital learning that everyone have ever seen. Digital learning meaning not learning about programming or coding, but digital learning of how to use certain applications more efficiently or effectively. With that being said, the other thing is the organization is being forced to do things that we really didn't want to plan on, because we liked going into the office. We've paid our lease out for several years. If I was a business, I might have had naming rights on the building as well. So obviously it's already a fixed overhead that it's part of cost of business. So moving to that acceleration of being able to work anywhere and everywhere as you choose fit was something that was still kind of like, yeah, I think everyone still likes coming in, until the pandemic hit and everyone was forced to do that. We then realized that it is possible. So digitization is inevitable. The problem that comes up here is we don't have the infrastructure in place. And what I mean by that is, like, you can work from home, not denying that, but the infrastructure of the lines, how fast or speed your internet connection is, how many lines you might have, how many machines you might have that works at home that the family can use. So if you have a large family, the costs go a lot up because you need to put in more lines or bandwidth, and also you need more machines if family is learning and things like that. So there's a lot of extra costs that people are not thinking of. The bigger concern right now is cybersecurity, and not enough people are talking about that. You might be secure in your office. You might have enterprise security. That's also something that is not happening out there, surprisingly. But when you're back home, you might not have as stringent security measures as you might have within the company. And that's a backdoor for criminal activity to come into organizations. And the third thing is really, what does your organization stand for now? I mean, it's no longer about profit, but profit with purpose. Before, it was the profit motive, which was to make money on behalf of shareholders. Then it unfortunately went to profit hunger, where profit at all costs, and we started focusing on quarterly results, which meant it was very short-term thinking by default. And now with the opportunity we've all had to stop a bit and rethink about what does it all actually mean, I wouldn't say it's a growing movement, but there is a big demand that businesses now have purpose, or the profit that they make has a purpose or a function that benefits a much wider majority, as opposed to just a smaller group within the society.
Yeah, the cybersecurity is definitely a big issue, I believe. Do you remember in the beginning of the pandemic, there were so many instances with hacking of Zoom because it seemed the entire world started using Zoom.
Yeah.
And I was always wondering, why other conferencing software is not as involved. When I used to work for British Telecom or BT conferencing, I mean, we used the Microsoft application at that time was Live Meeting, and then we used WebEx, a Cisco WebEx application. But I think Zoom really offered really cheaper options for, in some cases, similar quality, but the costs are definitely lower. But yes, the security has been, compromised, and I'm glad that some measures have been put in place, because in most cases, the users could have fixed that, remedied that situation by creating meetings with passcodes or requiring like if you are coming into the meeting, I have to admit you versus. It's also going to be a challenge with digital education.
Yes, so Alex, I'm glad you mentioned that, because we are or fortunate enough to have worked or currently working in situations that we've done working from home for quite some time. So we know what the process or what the routine is. But when we look back on it, we have the assumption that we can have a high-speed internet or broad, bandwidth or wide bandwidth line put into our residence, or we can, change our subscription to make it higher. But if you look at other places in the world where infrastructure may not be as strong, then the possibility of development then starts getting restricted. Then there's a lot of arguments saying, well, then there's opportunity there to increase the infrastructure and things like that. But what we're concerned more about here, not saying that investment in infrastructure doesn't create jobs, is how are we able to get the mind share or the brain trust of everyone in this world? So digitization is one way of doing that. And the more we're able to get our ideas together and things like that, the more opportunity there is for advancement or innovation and creativity. And that's not going to happen. That's going to widen the disparity we're seeing. The pandemic has highlighted for everyone.
And you're right, the disparities are definitely, I think they're going to intensify, and that's where running businesses with purpose, as you mentioned several times, and in the previous podcast episode, is going to be important. If you look at the situation where just one city, for example, where I live, we have areas, the zip codes that really have access to some of the stronger broadband, type of services, but you drive 20-30 minutes away from the locations from my location, and you're going to have poor internet access. People who are, going to struggle, especially the kids who are learning online now.
Yeah.
That's the struggle.
I mean, just on education and business side, the move towards telemedicine. So without a broadband or high bandwidth connection, then you might not have access to healthcare. And this is something that rural areas that are further from urban areas, can benefit from. But again, the infrastructure needs to be put in for that. And I'm not sure if that's happening. I know in Australia, they're trying to get stuff in, but it's sort of like, it's such an important thing. It should be a national priority. But you have things like keeping people in jobs right now because of what's happening with with the lockouts and all, lockdowns and all that. Yes, it is important, but at the same time, are you creating the opportunities for the future, or are you just prolonging a death? As awful as that may sound as well. So there's a lot of there's always been competing priorities out there, but the situation or the period we're in right now is only highlighting how bad it is.
Yeah, the gaps are definitely being highlighted. But with this said, this pandemic, COVID-19, has been actually an equalizer in many ways, because it's in a way pushing many companies to take a closer look and no longer delay, because there is no luxury to delay, on how they actually deal with those times, where before they could have maybe changed, put it down on that list of priorities of how to address, whether it's digital education, of how to increase the cybersecurity, or how to contribute to, the rest of the world with the health issues and things like that. So as they say, things do happen for a reason. So potentially, something good comes out of it. That's my hope. I'm just being an optimist.
Yeah, if you look back, I mean, for us, we can look back in the late 90s. Yeah, late 90s, the digital economy, that's when e-commerce just started to take off. And, everyone was saying digitization. Well, it should have happened then. It's taken us close to over 20 years to finally say it will happen, because we have no other choice. It's interesting to see where it's a meshing together for a company, a competitive advantage into a comparative advantage into an operational advantage to just its plain operations. And that's sort of like just gone squished into a small pill, where you need to do it because it is an operational concern if you're not digitized completely. And of course that creates worry on job security, because as we mechanize things, the work that used to go in can be done by a different process, but everything can be done by a different process, with the exception of the artisans.
Right. No, I absolutely agree with you. And that constant talk in the past about culture, the human side of things. It seemed to me before it was more of a lip service, because it really all came down to the bottom line, decreasing costs, doing more with less. Well, here we go. Now we're actually forced, businesses are forced to say, well, we cannot really continue unless we change that culture towards the human side. So that becomes kind of popular and everybody is following that.
And
Um,
and
thank you.
I'm glad you raised the human side. What I'm seeing now is that there's a personality split or a split in personality within the business about what is a business and what is a charity. The thing is, at the end of the day, the organization is only as good as its people. And the problem with that is if we keep talking about the human side of things, but we keep delivering it as a business side, then there's never, it's always a split personality syndrome. What we need to start seeing is one, yes, business for purpose is a step towards that direction, right? But at the same time, how do you make a business more human, right? So the pandemic has highlighted one thing, is that human interactivity is important. And what it's done, or it being the pandemic, is highlighted and also fueled mental health issues
Right.
across the world and within the organization. And it's still a very taboo subject. I mean, it's less taboo now because I can say mental health on a public forum like this, right? But if you brought the topic of mental health into any conversation, it's still not talked about. Instead, you talk about the techniques that addresses mental health. So it's like, oh yeah, mindfulness, meditation. Oh yeah, when I go for my time off, so you're still using euphemisms or surrogates for mental health. And until we start addressing mental health, then we can't do that. So what is business recovery? You need to start really focusing on the individual that is helping you create your business, and that goes down from accessibility through the internet. It goes down to the purpose or the mission of the organization, and the final stage is really on how does that individual get supported within the organization so that he or she can do their best type of work. It is complex. It is very complex, and it will require individuals that get it rather than looking at ticking off boxes.
Yeah, and I think another factor that is going to impact the transformation journey is the change of the world affairs. And I'm referring to politics, who is going to be in charge of setting the policies. And it's global, really. If you look at the entire global scene, everybody is dealing with pandemic differently. From my perspective, some of the efforts that are being made now some will stay and some will have to change again. And of course, change is the part of life. That's fine. You talk about mental health. I think those issues for yet another drastic kind of recovery, depending on who is going to be making policies, is going to probably push the world that's already ridden with a lot of issues such as depression, such as anxiety, drug abuse and alcohol abuse. It's probably going to intensify. And that's really, I'm not trying to sound doom and gloom, but that's just my opinion, that it will take strong leadership. Unfortunately, I don't think right now there is strong leadership that is capable of coming up with this innovative solution in as many companies as needed, right, to make that big impact. Because it seems that corporations, they will cling to, oh, this is the culture, I'm going to take the cancel culture. They're going to do that virtue signaling and do what, maybe the popular opinion is out there versus sticking to the purpose. And that's my fear. It's eventually going to ruin them.
And I think you hit it on the head, is that I don't think we need strong leaders, but we need real leaders.
Yeah.
And what I mean by real leaders are individuals that will say the things that are painful, because it takes a leader to point out things that can be changed, and not say the things that the majority wants to hear. because there is always the tyranny of the majority. And unfortunately, when you come down to policy, it is complex, and people walking into political office, regardless of what system you follow, are highly unprepared. I mean, how many of them actually have read politics? How many of them have actually read philosophy? How many of them have actually read social economic policy and all that? No, they rely on advisors. And these advisors themselves, how many have actually been in the field experiencing it? I know it's an impossible task now to be a policymaker, but at the same time, we're kind of making policy in your own ivory tower. And that doesn't work, because at the end of the day, it's sort of like within a vacuum. Yes, in all things that is working, this policy works well. But when more than that now, we're very interconnected, whether we like it or not.
Yeah,
So
you
it
can't
takes,
operate in echo chambers, and that's
correct.
I'm
Yes,
noticing
that's
the
it.
same.
Echo chambers.
Yeah, and that's what I'm seeing. A lot of organizations, there's such a polarization, and it's unfortunate that, let's say, the businesses get attached to a certain ideology. Once you're attached to ideology,
Yeah,
that's
yes,
a
that's
fail.
right. You can, yeah, that's you. And that was the second thing that, thank you for
Oh,
reminding me. It's like there is no right system. There's not only a right system. If you just use a bit of courage and look across all the global headlines, every economy in the world is doing well according to their own ways. So you can't say that one system have triumphed over another. And that's just like going down to ideology. There's nothing wrong with going down to ideology, because that's your principles, right? But at the same time, with your principles, although it is your values as well, when it comes to a society, then a fully functioning society is one that is broad-minded, is able to consider as many opinions as possible and then act on it. I haven't seen one in the world that's been able to do that.
well, having a healthy debate is, I think, what
Healthy debate,
brings,
that's it.
yeah,
Thank you.
it's probably what brings innovation. I'm comparing a lot of different societies, but based on the history of it, I really thought that America for the longest time had offered that. And
Yeah.
what I'm noticing right now, that a lot of folks are living in fear of stating something that does not agree with the majority, and maybe it's
Yeah.
not even a majority anymore. Who knows?
Yeah.
Just based on what we're seeing.
And I want to pick that up with you, because that is like in any brainstorming exercise in an organization. Is there going to be someone that's going to say the alternative within that room? So having a healthy debate in brainstorming is important, and knowing how to have a healthy debate. The second is having the courage and having the grace and magnanimity to accept other opinions as well. You don't see that quite a lot in brainstorming sessions in organization. The other pet peeve I have about brainstorming organization is you have people coming and say, why is it taking so long? Or, I don't think we're getting anywhere. Okay. We only have an hour for this and we have to make it work. All right. So it's sort of like you're being put up to a firing squad. Sing the best you can before I kill. I mean, come on. I mean, if we start thinking about, yes, we have to set a time limit for generating ideas, but we cannot force great ideas. People keep overlooking that. Once you force great ideas, you're not going to get any great ideas. So my call out or call to action for anyone listening to this is, when you participate or you call for a brainstorming exercise, give it its time. And its time isn't 1 hour, that's it. It needs to be built on, and built on until it's exhaustive and people are tired of, and then you have a sound idea on it. That's iteration. But because of the mindset we have, we just say, no, it keeps changing, it keeps changing. It's like, yes, I know it keeps changing, but we need it to the point where we're able to do that. So it's an interesting thing. I've been thinking a lot about brainstorming recently, generating ideas and all that. And I realized that, wow, our fundamental approach to brainstorming is already set up for failure.
In what I think that for businesses to transform, yes, I understand that the goal here is to take on something big and new, but start with something small, create a prototype, then iterate, because there could be more options. Really understand what the point of view of the individuals in the room. It's design thinking. It's giving an opportunity for something to, for the idea to be born, not forced, but to be born through discussion, through understanding how the current process works and what people really would love to change. So yes, we need real leaders, but we also need the leaders who will give that permission and say, go create. Right now, it's that time.
Yeah, yeah. And we need to also remember it took Steve Jobs a long time to create the iPhone that a lot of people are using, or the Android that people are using as well. It didn't happen overnight. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Last question that I wanted to ask you. This is just an opinion, so no judgments here. Do you believe that we will see a complete transformation of workforce in the near future? And when I say near future, I'm talking, a couple of years.
A complete transformation? No, I don't think so. I think if a vaccine does come out, we will go back to old habits. There might be a few organizations that might change as a result of it. I think if we look back at the global financial crisis, we thought that the whole financial system will change. It hasn't. Old habits die hard. What will change is our approach to how we work. As individuals. So the corporate structure or the business modeling may not change significantly, but the way we approach work will change as individuals. So the prioritization of my personal time as opposed to what I will sacrifice for the company are going to be quite different. Because most people have had a taste of it already. It's like giving a taste of freedom for someone who has always been restricted in a lot of things. You can never take it back once they've tasted it.
Yeah, well, I hope that some good aspects that this pandemic really pushed a lot of businesses to transform and change will actually help them remain sustainable. And this is really the topic that we want to discuss in our next part 3 of our series, Next Steps to Success. For success, where we will delve into the topic of sustainability and impact. If you liked this segment, I invite you to join us in our discussion by liking and commenting below. Subscribe to our channel, The Third Side of the Coin. We hope we're delivering value to you. And to learn more about executive leadership and career coaching, resume writing, and organizational development services, please go to www.excalibercoaching.com. You can also reach out to Tim and I on LinkedIn.